In the savage skies over wartime Europe, death was a constant companion. For the young men of the American 8th Air Force, flying their B-17 flying fortresses into the heart of Germany, every mission was a roll of the dice. They faced swarms of elite Luftwaffe fighters and skies black with anti-aircraft fire. They watched as the bombers next to them, full of their friends, were ripped apart by cannon fire or simply vanished in a blinding flash of orange and black. The odds of completing a full tour of 25 missions were terrifyingly low. Survival was measured in inches and seconds. But amidst this horror, a legend was born. It was a legend not just of the men, but of the machine they flew. The B-17 was designed to be a flying fortress, but it proved to be something more. It was a plane that simply refused to die. Again and again, B-17s would absorb an amount of punishment that seemed scientifically impossible, with huge chunks of their fuselage blown away, with engines on fire, with tails nearly severed, and would somehow, through a combination of brilliant engineering and sheer, stubborn will, claw their way back across the English Channel and bring their crews home. This is not the story of a battle or a strategy. This is the story of survival against all odds. It is the tale of the unkillable airplane, the B-17s that were shot to pieces, declared dead by their attackers, but kept on flying. This is the story of the dead planes that flew home. The Boeing B-17 was born from a 1934 Army competition for a new multi-engine bomber. The design was revolutionary for its time, but its most important feature was its sheer toughness. Its designers, foreseeing the punishment it would have to take, built it with incredible structural redundancy. The main wing was built around a massive, bridge-like spar that ran through the fuselage. This meant that even if large sections of the wing were damaged, the main structure could often hold together. The flight controls were not simple push rods. They were a complex system of duplicate cables that ran down both sides of the fuselage. If the cables on one side were severed by shrapnel, the pilot could often still control the plane using the cables on the other side. The plane was, in essence, designed to be shot to pieces and keep flying. But no one, not even its designers, could have predicted the incredible feats of survival it would achieve. Perhaps the most famous story is that of a B-17 named All-American. On February 1, 1943, while returning from a mission over Tunis in North Africa, the All-Americans formation was attacked by German Messerschmitt Bf-109s. During the chaotic dogfight, a German fighter, its pilot likely dead or dying, lost control and flew directly at the All-American. The B-17's pilot, Lieutenant Kendrick Bragg, threw his plane into a violent dive. It wasn't enough. The Bf-109 smashed into the rear of the bomber, its wings slicing through the B-17's fuselage just behind the ball turret. The impact was catastrophic. The entire left horizontal stabilizer and elevator were completely sheared off. The rear of the fuselage was almost severed, leaving a gaping 16-foot-long hole. The tail gunner was trapped in his isolated compartment, connected to the rest of the plane by only a few narrow strips of metal floor. The tail section was flapping violently in the wind, held on by a thread. By all rights, the All-American should have instantly spun out of control and plunged into the sea. The German pilots, watching the collision, reported the bomber as destroyed and broke off their attack. But inside the crippled plane, Lieutenant Bragg and his co-pilot were fighting for their lives. The plane was in a terrifying dive. Pulling back on the controls with all their strength, they somehow managed to level the bomber out. The tail was still attached, just barely. They realized that as long as they didn't make any sudden movements, the airflow over the remaining part of the tail might keep them stable. The crew in the back of the plane, seeing the sky through the massive hole in their aircraft, prepared to bail out. But when they saw the tail gunner was trapped, they refused to leave him. They grabbed spare parachute harnesses and used the straps to try and lash the two sides of the broken fuselage together, a desperate attempt to keep the tail from ripping off completely. For over an hour and a half, they flew this shattered wreck of an airplane over 200 miles back to their base in Algeria. Every gust of wind threatened to tear the tail off. They couldn't use their radio, as the antenna was gone. They had no idea if they would make it. Miraculously, they did. As they approached their airfield, the ground crews looked up in stunned disbelief. They were seeing a ghost, a plane that was flying with its back broken. Lieutenant Bragg brought the All-American in for a perfect landing. The moment the plane slowed to a stop on the runway, the tail section finally gave way and collapsed onto the ground. Every member of the crew had survived. The photographs taken of the All-American that day became legendary, a stunning testament to the B-17's incredible toughness. This was not an isolated incident. Stories of zombie B-17s returning from the dead were common. There was the story of Hang the Expense, a B-17 that took a direct flak hit to the nose. The entire plexiglass nose cone, along with the bombardier's and navigator's positions, was obliterated. The pilots were flying in a cockpit that was now open to the freezing 200-mile-per-hour slipstream at 25,000 feet. The bombardier was killed instantly, and the navigator was severely wounded. Yet the pilots, their faces covered in frost from the direct exposure, flew the plane for hours back to England and landed it safely. Then there was the incredible tale of Ye Olde Pub, a B-17 commanded by 2nd Lieutenant Charlie Brown, on a mission to Bremen in December 1943. Over the target, their bomber was savaged by over a dozen German fighters. 2 of their 4 engines were knocked out. A third was damaged and losing power. The oxygen, hydraulic, and electrical systems were shot to pieces. The tail gunner was killed, and most of the crew were wounded, including Lieutenant Brown, who was hit by a piece of shrapnel. Their plane was riddled with holes, flying on a single good engine, and had fallen out of formation, alone in the sky over Germany. They were a sitting duck. A German ace named Franz Stigler, flying a Bf-109, closed in for the kill. He had already shot down 2 bombers that day. This would be an easy third victory, one that would likely earn him the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor. But as he flew up alongside the crippled B-17 to finish it off, he was stunned by what he saw. He could see directly inside the bomber through the massive holes in its fuselage. He saw the dead tail gunner, slumped over his guns. He saw wounded men tending to each other. He saw the pilot, barely conscious, struggling to keep the plane level. For Stigler, this was no longer a battle. This was a slaughter. In an act of chivalry that seems almost unbelievable, he decided he could not shoot them down. Instead, he flew his fighter alongside the B-17's wing, making no hostile moves. The terrified American crew thought he was toying with them, but Stigler was escorting them. He flew with them for miles, his presence warding off other German fighters. He escorted them all the way to the North Sea coast, gave them a final salute, and then peeled away, letting them go. Lieutenant Brown, against all conceivable odds, managed to fly his shattered plane across the sea and land it at an airfield in England. The story of this incredible encounter, an act of mercy between enemies in the middle of a brutal war, was kept secret for decades, but it was another testament to a plane that simply refused to give up. The reasons for the B-17's durability were baked into its design. The engineers at Boeing had deliberately overbuilt the aircraft. The semi-monocoque fuselage design meant that the skin of the aircraft itself carried much of the structural load. This meant that even with huge sections of the non-load-bearing framework shot away, the plane could often maintain its integrity. The 4-engine design was another critical safety feature. The B-17 was notoriously underpowered, but it could, and often did, fly home on just 2 engines. There are even documented cases of B-17s making it back on a single engine. The crews themselves developed an almost mystical faith in their aircraft. They knew it was slow and vulnerable, but they also knew it could take an incredible beating. This faith was a crucial psychological component of the air war. It gave men the courage to climb into their planes day after day, knowing that even if the worst happened, the fort might just have what it takes to bring them home. They gave their planes names, painted elaborate nose art on them, and treated them not as machines, but as members of the crew. There was Memphis Belle, the first bomber to famously complete its 25-mission tour. There was Abido Lace, which survived over 80 missions. And there were countless others, each with its own story of near misses and miraculous returns. One of the most visually stunning examples of the B-17's toughness was the story of a bomber from the 381st Bomb Group. During a mission, a flak shell exploded directly in the radio compartment, located in the middle of the fuselage. The explosion blew a hole in the side of the plane so large that a man could have walked through it. The radio operator was killed. The fuselage was structurally broken, and the entire rear section of the plane, including the tail, began to sag downwards at a terrifying angle. The plane should have snapped in two, but the duplicate control cables running along the top of the fuselage remained intact. The pilot, fighting the controls, found that he could still fly the plane. For over 2 hours, he flew this broken aircraft back across enemy territory, a plane that looked like it was defying the laws of physics. When it landed, the ground crew couldn't believe their eyes. It was a plane that had no right to be flying, yet there it was. These stories, and hundreds like them, cemented the legend of the Flying Fortress. For the Luftwaffe pilots who had to fight it, the B-17 was a frustrating and formidable opponent. They would pour hundreds of cannon shells and machine gun rounds into a bomber, see it catch fire, see entire pieces of it fall off, only to watch it stubbornly hold its place in the formation and keep flying. A German fighter ace was quoted as saying, "Fighting the fortresses was like chopping down a tree with a small axe. You had to hit it again, and again, and again." Of course, the legend can sometimes overshadow the grim reality. The B-17 was not invincible. Thousands of them were shot down, and tens of thousands of American airmen lost their lives in the skies over Europe. But the legend was important. It was a source of hope in a campaign defined by staggering losses. Every time a dead plane limped home, riddled with holes but with its crew alive, it was a victory over the odds, a testament to the resilience of both the men and their machine. It reinforced the belief that survival was possible, even in the face of the hellish air war over Germany. The story of the unkillable B-17 is a story of incredible engineering, but it is also a story of the human spirit. It's about the pilots who refused to give up on their crippled aircraft, the navigators who found their way home with no instruments, and the gunners who kept fighting even when their planes were coming apart around them. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress was designed to be tough, but no one could have known just how tough it would prove to be. It was a plane that absorbed an impossible amount of punishment, defied the laws of aerodynamics and probability, and time again, brought its boys home. It was the plane that could be shot to pieces, left for dead, but would simply refuse to die.